Professor Black Ops, you said, let's get it. iOS and AWS Credentials. Basically, developers leaving AWS Credentials hard coded in these apps, so people are actually getting in there, stealing them, right, and getting into their AWS infrastructure. So, and I did a couple videos how to search for them and actually what to do if somebody actually stole your root credentials. So, just look in my channel and there's a AWS playlist. So let's get at it real quick. Over 1,000 iOS apps found exposing hard-coded AWS credentials. You shouldn't have hard-coded AWS credentials in your iOS apps, right? So if they're in there, you should be using parameters and pass the stuff in for the infrastructure so that wouldn't happen. So security researchers are raising the alarm for mobile app developers relying on insecure practices that Amazon Web Service credentials, making the supply chain vulnerable. Malicious actors could take advantage of these private databases, leading to data breaches and exposing of customer personal data because they're using the username and password hard coding to get to the database, right? The scale of the problem, researchers at Symantec Threat Hunting Team, part of Broadcom Software, found 1,859 applications containing hard-coded AWS credentials, most of them being iOS apps. Just 37 of those were Android. That's real surprising to me because iOS usually have a much better vetting process than Android. So for almost 2,000 iOS apps compared to 37 Android, that's super surprising to me. But roughly 77% of those applications contain valid AWS access tokens that could be used for direct access to private cloud services. Additionally, 874 applications contain valid AWS tokens the hacker could use for accessing cloud instances containing live service database that holds millions of records. We got to do better. These databases contains usually account details, log, internal communications, registration information, and other sensitive data depending on the type of the app. The real examples, threat analysis highlighted 3 notable cases in their report where they exposed AWS tokens could have had catastrophic consequences for both author and the users of the vulnerable apps. One example is a business-to-business company providing internet communications to over 15,000 medium to large companies. The software development toolkit the company provided to clients to access its service contains AWS keys, exposing all private customer data stored on the platform. The sad part is you would hope that even if they supplied the AWS keys, since it was for a particular client, that client would only be able to see their data, right? They're not using multiple databases, or they're not using, we call it virtual private databases. When that particular customer logs on, it spins up an ID, so only that ID for that customer records could be seen by that customer, right? So there's also some programming issues going on there. Another case is a third-party digital identity and authentication SDK used by several banking apps on the iOS that included valid cloud credentials. Due to this, all authentication data from all customers for those banks, including names, date of birth, and even biometrical digital fingerprint scans, were exposed to the cloud. Finally, Symantec found a sports betting technology platform used by 16 online gambling apps that exposed the entire infrastructure and cloud services with admin level read and write permissions, right? So that's when you're getting crazy with it, right? Cloud service with admin level read and write. That means you can just delete their whole infrastructure. Why is this happening? Issues with hard coding and forgotten cloud service credentials is basically a supply chain problem, as negligence of SDK developer can impact an entire collection of apps and services that rely on it. Mobile app development relies on ready-made components instead of creating everything from scratch. So if the app publishes doesn't run through a check on the SDK or libraries that use it, the security is likely propagated into their project, right? So that's when you have reviews, and once again, Amazon has a ton of things to actually go through. They actually started a service that will actually go through your code and look for hard-coded credentials because it's just so prevalent. They gave you a service to actually do that now. As for developers' hard-coded credentials in their product, this is a matter of convenience during development and testing, skipping proper code review for security issues, Referring to these reasons why this is happening, Symantec highlight the following possibilities. Downloading and uploading assets, resources required for the apps, usually large media files, recordings, or images. Accessing configuration files for the app or registering the device and collecting device information and storing it in the cloud. Accessing cloud services that require authentication, such as translation service. No specific reason, dead code, or used for testing and never removed. Failing to remove these credentials when the software is ready to be deployed by its clients, a matter of carelessness, and the results of absence of a checklist-based release process that includes security. Right, so they want a checklist. Of course, I want it to be automated, right? So when you check your code in, it's going to look for those credentials and stuff. And we're starting to do a little more labbing on this channel, but we're going to create that DevSecOps pipeline to check for these things. So you should see how it's done in the real world, right? So I keep saying that, but we're going to make that happen. Once again, Apple iOS app, storing AWS credentials. You know I love that AWS lifestyle. So once again, Professor Black Ops, please subscribe.